League of Women Voters Troy area is happy to welcome you to this candidates forum. I am Karen Fabian, the Voter Service Chairperson for the League and tonight's moderator. This forum affords you the opportunity to meet the candidates running for Troy Mayor and City Council. Their names will appear on the November 5th ballot, along with one ballot proposal for Oakland Community College. You will be asked to vote for one candidate for a 4-year term as mayor and for 3 candidates who are seeking a 4-year term on City Council. As many of you know, the League of Women Voters is a national, nonpartisan organization which welcomes all persons of voting age as members. The League of Women Voters does not support or oppose any candidate or political party. It does take action in public interest on particular issues, but only after careful study and consideration by members. The League emphasizes the importance of individuals working together to achieve good government responsive to the needs of all persons. The governing body in Troy is the City Council, made up of 7 members: the mayor, mayor pro tem, and council. Members are represented through equal voting powers and dictate policy to management through resolution. The duties of the council include appointing administrative personnel, transacting city business, managing the city's financial operations, appointing members of the boards, protecting the welfare of the citizens and its inhabitants, and providing community leadership. Tonight, we are dividing the forum into 2 parts. The forum will begin with the candidates for City Council. Then we will take a short break and the audience questions will be presented to our 2 candidates for mayor. They are currently sequestered in a room and unable to hear the questions or answers of these candidates. The City Council candidates are Edna Abraham, Daniel Agawas, Ali Apahidian, Teresa Brooks, Ann Erickson Galt, and Sunil Shivaraman. The format for this candidates meeting has been established by the League of Women Voters Troy area. Each candidate will make an opening statement of 2 minutes. The timer, Kathy, will signal the cards of your time frame. At the end of the allotted time, the camera will pull to a long shot and the microphone will be turned off. We will begin our opening statements with Ms. Abraham.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters and to CMN TV for hosting this forum, and for those who are watching tonight in the audience and at home later on. For those who don't know me, my name is Edna Abraham and I've been serving on City Council for the past 4 years while working as a program manager at General Motors. Troy has been my home since 1976. I'm a product of the Troy School District. I went to Hill, Larson, and then Athens. And after I graduated from U of M with a degree in chemical engineering, I returned to my hometown. And I returned because of the quality of life services the city afforded. My connection with the community has strengthened over the years, as you can imagine. I'm a member of the Friends of the Troy Public Library, the Troy Historic Village, the Stage Nature Center. I'm a supporter of the Troy Community Coalition, the Troy Police and Fire Benevolent Association, and the Troy Public Library Endowment Fund, just to name a few local organizations. My involvement with city matters goes back about 10 years, when the funding for the library first became at risk. I became a grassroots activist and spent the summer of 2011 advocating for that library millage that was decisively approved by Troy voters. When I ran for City Council 4 years ago, it was because I wanted to give back to the community that had served me so well. Still my motivation today in running for a 2nd term. It is said that the best indicator of future behavior is past behavior. I've approached the council role with professionalism, integrity, and a strong work ethic. My voting record reflects a consistent pattern of protecting the community's best interests. I've sometimes been the sole no vote in instances where I believe the resolution before me would not be in the best interest of Troy. I have a voting record that demonstrates that I've advocated for transparency and ethics reform, particularly in matters relating to the former city manager. I've supported common sense development that grows our tax base but preserves the character of our neighborhoods.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Agawas?
First, I want to thank the League of Women Voters for having me, and thank you for those who are attending. For those that don't know me, my name is Daniel Agawas. My wife and I moved to Troy nearly 6 years ago. It was our first home that we purchased after we got married, and now we're raising a young family here. We live on a quiet dead-end street, and it's walking distance to a beautiful park and elementary school that my daughter will one day attend. We love that we have a little taste of country in an otherwise modern city. For the last 3 years, I've served on the Troy Zoning Board of Appeals, and protecting neighborhoods like this is one of our top priorities. For every proposed variance request, I analyze the impact of the community and the health, safety, and welfare for the neighborhood. I've seen firsthand the tensions between commercial developers and residents. Residents like myself are concerned that over-aggressive development will encroach upon their neighborhoods. Meanwhile, the developers often receive mixed signals and are confused sometimes by the Troy zoning ordinances. I'll work hard to protect our neighborhoods and find the proper balance with development. Professionally, I'm a financial consultant. This means I've worked for 12 years in fraud investigations and forensic investigations very similar to the one Plant Moran did just for the city recently. I also calculate damages in court cases that involve fraud. I have seen and understand how to prevent fraud, detect fraud, and implement the proper accounting controls to minimize the chance of fraud happening in the future. When I think of local government, I think about my daughter and the future I'd like her to have in the city. I'd like her to have many recreational opportunities and places to play. And this is why I'm committed to developing and implementing the Troy Trails and Pathway system, and why I'd also like to protect the Civic Center from commercial development. I believe that we need a strong local government, strong financially, which has integrity and protects our neighborhoods. Thank you.
Mr. Apahidian?
Good evening. I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters as well for organizing this event, and to thank everybody in the audience and everybody at home that's watching. My name is Ali Apahidian. I've been a resident of Troy for 9 years. I'm married for 19 years with 4 kids, 1 in high school, 2 in middle school, and 1 in elementary school. Professionally, I'm an engineer with more than 23 years experience, both in the public and private sectors. And I'm running for council because I'm committed to bring a renewed focus on ethics so we can rebuild trust in our great city. I'm committed to serving with absolute integrity and transparency. I believe we can move forward in an honest, healthy, and respectful way. I'm also running because I want to leverage my 5 years of serving on the Planning Commission to ensure that we balance development with protecting our green space and our open space. As Planning Commissioner, I'm proud to have supported 2 new ordinances that were passed that were intended to maximize open space for developments and also to prevent developers from clear cutting without tree mitigation. As a future council member, I'm committed to continuing to fund our library in a fiscally responsible way and to explore all possibilities to expand our Trails and Pathways network. I'm proud to have the endorsement of trusted public servants in our community. Current council members, my fellow planning commissioners, former Troy school board members, former Oakland County commissioner, local business people, and many others who trust in my ability to serve our community with professionalism and integrity. I respectfully ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks?
I would like to thank the League of Women Voters for hosting this wonderful forum. My name is Teresa Brooks. I am the wife of a very supportive husband, the mother of 3 amazing daughters. I am a physician and a small business owner. I completed my undergraduate degree at the University of Michigan, went to medical school at Michigan State, and did my residency at Mayo Clinic. I am here tonight because I started paying attention. I have always performed my civic duties by voting, but in recent years, I really started paying attention to what was happening at all levels of government. And it's no secret that we've had our own problems right here in Troy. And when I started paying attention, I got frustrated. but I decided I wanted to channel that in a productive way. So I got involved at a grassroots level. And when this position became available, I was asked by members of my community to consider running. At first, I was hesitant because it's not easy putting yourself out there. However, with the support of my husband, I decided, why not me? Why not people like me? If we don't get involved, how do things change? How do things get better? People have asked me how I do this with children. And my response is, I'm doing this for my children. I would not be taking this step to run for city council if I did not know that I bring a unique and valuable voice to the table. As a physician, I am held to the highest moral and ethical values, and I carry this with me in everything that I do. As a mother, I chose to move to Troy because of the wonderful parks, recreational facilities, and public schools. As a small business owner, I know how to work with the team and balance a budget. My patients trust me with their lives, and I'm asking you to trust me with your vote this November 5th.
Ms. Galt.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event, and to the public who are watching because you care about Troy. I'm Ann Erickson Galt, and I'm running for Troy City Council because I understand what makes this city special and why people want to live here. We want a safe, comfortable community to raise our children, to work, to play, to grow old. We want to protect our green space and our cherished institutions, such as the library and our parks. And we want a city council that we can trust. As an attorney, a small business owner, a community activist, a wife, a mother, and a 15-year resident of Troy, I have the knowledge, skills, and experience necessary to protect our way of life. That's why I served on my Homeowners Association board for 14 years, so I can protect my corner of Troy. And I'm going to take that same devotion for protecting our way of life to my service on City Council. It was my legal background that first inspired me to become involved in Troy. In 2016, I witnessed members of our City Council try to brush under the rug the wrongdoing of our former city manager. As one who lives by a code of professional ethics, I couldn't stand by and watch our city be led by people who do not believe in transparency and accountability. So I filed a FOIA request to release the secret report, and as a result, we now have ethical, competent city management. But it shouldn't have to come to that. The residents of Troy deserve leadership that doesn't have to be pushed into doing the right thing. As your city council member, I will bring ethical standards the same ethical standards that guide my professional service will guide my service on council. As an attorney, I'm a listener, I'm an advocate, and a problem solver, which are exactly the skills we need for council. We need council members we can trust who are listening to us, and that's why I ask you to vote for me, Ann Erickson Galt, for Troy City Council.
Mr. Shivaraman.
First of all, thank you to the League of Women's Voters for holding this event, and thank you to the citizens of Troy who are here and at home watching us. Hello, I am Sunil Shivaraman. I'm one among you. I've been living in Troy for more than 16 years, and I'm here with, I'm a husband. I'm married with 2 kids who are going through a wonderful public school systems. I'm an engineer by profession, and I've been at Ford Motor Company for the last 24 years. One thing I want to tell each and every one of you is I'm one among you. I'm the independent voice of Troy. And my promise to you right now, right here, is to provide you a clean, efficient, and transparent government. Now, I've been working, or rather volunteering quite a lot for the city of Troy. I sit on the traffic committee. I've been there for 3 years. I sit on the financial ideas team, been there for 3 years. I'm helping youth through the Troy Youth Assistance. I'm also a history buff, so I'm a trustee of the Historical Village. Those are some of my volunteer activities that I do. Now, let me cut to the chase, tell you what my top 3 goals are. 1, change the tone at the top. I've got 24 years of professional experience being a people leader at Ford Motor Company. I want to ensure the actions that were recommended by the forensic report will be acted on, and there will be sustainable efforts put in so that this does not happen again. Number 2, I coined a term called green development. Development is needed for every city. It brings in money, it lowers our taxes. But what we really need to do is, before development, we cannot eliminate green space. We cannot do that, and we cannot not listen to the people in the neighborhoods. And there's something called this population density that should be considered too. Last but least, we all pay taxes. We need to ensure that we get proper city services based on our taxes. And the most important thing is we need to make Troy affordable to all the people who are coming into our community, especially our senior citizens. Help me, help you. Thank you.
Candidates will be answering written questions submitted by the audience. Questions submitted are pertinent to the issues facing the current situation and the future direction of our community. Members of the League screen the question for duplication and appropriateness. All candidates will be given 1 minute to respond. I reserve the right to close discussion of one question and go on to the next. May I remind the audience that there will be no comments from the floor while the candidates are answering their questions. You will have an opportunity to speak to the candidates following this meeting. We'll now begin the question and answer period. Our first question is, Troy's library millage is expiring in June of 2021. What would be your position on how to move forward at that point? Mr. Agawas.
One thing I've noticed over the years in Troy, if there's one thing you don't touch, it's our public library. And going back 8 years or so, I noticed both sides were passionate about preserving the library and keeping it open as long as possible. There's two different theories. You could either fund it through a millage or fund it out of a general operating fund. Right now we have the millage. It's been going on for 8 years. It's about to expire in 2021. Even with that millage, it's projected, the library fund is projected to go near zero by 2022. So something needs to be done in order to maintain the funding, if not increase the funding a little bit. I'm open to both ways because I love the library. I know the path of least resistance is likely the millage, but I want to be pragmatic and find the best way to fund it possible.
Mr. Apahidian.
Having 4 kids in the Troy public school system and having the library in our city as an asset, it's something that we value and we prize, as so do so many families in our city. So that's one of the things that what I'm proposing to do is in 2021, once that millage expires, I think we need to have a conversation with the community. We need to go out there and listen and see what the community wants to do. Just as Mr. Agawa said, we have a couple options on the table. We have a very strong and robust surplus in our city, and one of the options is to actually tap into that fund if there would be a millage proposed, and if it doesn't pass, I think that one of the options actually is to tap into that fund and fund the library. Either way, I think the library is something that is an asset to our community. It provides a service that is irreplaceable, and I think we need to continue to fund that library in a responsible way.
Ms. Brooks.
As a mother of school-age children, this is personal for me. I know many families that use this incredible resource, including my own. Some of my favorite memories have been in the libraries with my children at story time. I actually was at the Troy Library learning more about it last night at the Citizens Academy. Our public library does so much to help our residents. It has incredible resources, including resources that help people with learning disabilities and cognitive impairments. It provides career and job resources and also allows residents to access electronic materials. It is an area where people of all ages gather. If the millage renewal fails, the library may be forced to reduce or even eliminate all of these resources. However, ultimately the library millage renewal should be decided by the residents of Troy. I will be proactive in leading discussions on sustainable library funding.
Ms. Galt.
When I'm knocking doors throughout our community, what I'm hearing again and again is the library is a treasured institution. And the city of Troy, the people of Troy, very much value the library, and we must do everything we can to protect it. And I'm glad that Ms. Brooks brought up the fact that the library does a lot more than simply lend books. It's not just books on a shelf. There's so many services that the library provides to people of all ages. And my family has enjoyed the library since we moved here. As far as how to fund it, that is something that the community is going to have to come together in some community engagement sessions and decide how we're going to fund the library. It's not just the operating expenses, the building needs work. As you may know, the roof is being worked on now. There are issues with the library funding that the community as a whole needs to decide.
Mr. Shivarama?
Yeah, the library is the heart of a community. You just walk into the Troy Library, you not only see that it's not just the people in Troy, it's the surrounding communities that come in and use the library. And again, you've heard it from others, as a parent of kids, you are always there at the library. If I had a blank check, I would have just written a check to keep it open for 7 days. And if I win the lotto tomorrow, that's what I'm going to do. So that's a given promise. Now, having said that, if I don't win the lotto, let's look at innovative ways. Again, with my professional experience, innovation is a key at where I work. There's innovation in finance. There's multiple options you can look at. And again, this has to be done with talking to the people, the common people of Troy. Let's listen to the voices. Let's come up with the most optimal solution. And let's keep the library running. Thank you.
Ms. Abraham?
In 2011, when the millage of 0.7 was passed, it yielded about $2.5 million a year for the library. And in 2011 dollars, that was enough for a 6-day library. It's not enough today. And the reason for that is most of our library staff is part-time, and minimum wage has gone up, and that has put a huge dent into the budget for the library. So we need to ask ourselves, and this conversation with the community needs to start in November, once we're past the election, on what kind of library do we want? Is it a 6-day library? And if it is, it's probably not 0.7 mils, it might need to be more. But do we want a 7-day library? Because that would be more than 0.7 mil. We need to start working with the community right now to understand what kind of library that you want. Because right now, we're barely eking by with the $2.5 million a year at 0.7 mils. So let's start talking about it now. I think we should get a 7-day library, but we need to do it in a sustainable way.
The next question. What reforms are needed to restore trust and confidence in city government? Mr. Apahidian.
Transparency and integrity are essential to our local government. I've read the reports that came out in terms of the actual trust and transparency issues that have happened at a management level. And there are a couple things that actually need to occur. One thing is improved communication between management and council. There was a disconnect there, and I think that's where an area that can be improved. If I get on council, I will propose that we actually have something in terms of our code of ethics that has more teeth, to actually have more engagement for our council in terms of what happens if the code of ethics is broken. And one thing we can do is actually improve that communication between management and city council. Another thing we can do is really provide that openness between council and the city, more communication.
Ms. Brooks?
I believe transparency is important at all levels of government. In medicine, I take an oath to do no harm. I am held to the highest moral and ethical values, and if I violate this standard, there are consequences. I can lose my medical license. I can lose the privilege of practicing medicine. I would like to see guidelines implemented as well to hold our elected officials accountable when they violate these standards. As a physician, I also have a strong concern for the welfare of others and would help to create a safe work environment. It is also important to avoid conflicts of interest or even the appearance of one. Residents need to be able to trust that their elected officials are working on their behalf. I will also work to improve communication between Troy residents and the public officials so that residents feel that their voices are being heard and considered during the decision-making process.
Ms. Galt?
A lot of candidates talk about transparency. I've walked the walk. I fought with the City Council to release the secret Lang report to make sure that we knew what our former city manager was up to, when some council members wanted to make sure that it remained confidential. Communication is a key to transparency. And it's not just communication one way with the council, telling the people what they think they want to hear. It is the council listening to the people. When we have that two-way communication, we not only have transparency, but then we can regain our trust. That communication is essential. And as an attorney, I am bound by a very strong code of ethics. And like Ms. Brooks, if I violate that code, I'm putting my profession at risk. So you can count on the fact that as your city council member, I will bring that same strong ethics to my service on council.
Mr. Shivaraman?
If you remember, I want to go back to my top goal. It is changing the tone at the top. And you can only lead by example. And I've done it at Ford Motor for the last 24 years. Let me give you an example of something that I'll push for once I'm elected as a councilman. Right now, the ledger, what we pay people, is up out in the public. The big thing I want to do is, I want to know what is the price I pay, who are the suppliers involved, who are the principals behind the suppliers, and what other bids came in, and why was this chosen. That is an open question, and of course there are some parts of it that cannot be put out in the public, which can be redacted, but that's one thing I want to do. Let's come out in the open, let's talk about it. We have an online system. The City of Troy is a wonderful online system. Let's put it out there. And that will be accessible for each and every citizen of Troy.
Ms. Abraham?
Thank you. I think the first thing that we can do is treat the forensic audit that Plant Moran did with a lot of respect and take it seriously. City staff has done their part in doing their reforms that were suggested by Plant Moran, and City Council needs to do the same. City Council needs to answer the same questions that city employees did and have those conversations, whether it's with Plant Moran or some other neutral third party. We need to understand what council did or did not do that enabled Brian Kishnick to behave the way that he did and ultimately break the law. We need to be accountable, and we need to do it openly, because the buck stops with council. The other thing that I would do is an ethics reform where there are real penalties for any violations. This is common in the private sector. Every year I have to sign disclosure statements of any personal relationships, and it's a normal expected thing, and there are severe penalties if I do not and if I lie. And we need to do the same in the government.
Mr. Agawas?
Well, at the heart of this issue is financial transparency and government transparency. It's what builds the trust between the people and elected officials, and it's the underpinning of a well-functioning government. Without it, we can't do anything right. My accounting background, doing forensic investigations, the most definable way to have real reform is to follow through with the Plant Moran report. We put a lot of money, taxpayer dollars, into doing that. It's a third-party, respected accounting firm. They gave 17 specific recommendations to how to tighten up accounting internal controls, how to improve whistleblower situations, and just general weaknesses within the city. The most definable, practical way of actually changing the culture is following through with this report. There's certain accounting principles related to petty cash, expense reimbursements, emergency funds, reporting, local meal reimbursements. There's many ways that if followed through with, it automatically improve the culture of our community.
Troy City Council are all nonpartisan positions. What does that mean to you? Ms. Brooks?
Thank you. When I treat my patients, I do not ask them who they voted for. I treat all of my patients with dignity and respect. Being nonpartisan means representing the people of Troy. It means valuing someone else's opinion regardless of their party affiliation. Local issues are nonpartisan, and good solutions are also nonpartisan. I am not coming with an agenda. This position is bigger than me. What attracted me to City Council is the fact that it is nonpartisan. I am integrated into my community and doing what's best for my community. There are 85,000 people who live here in the city of Troy. Everyone on the stage is one of only 6 people who decided this year to step up and represent our city. It's not easy to do that, and I respect each and every one of them. If I have the privilege of being elected to City Council, I will wholeheartedly work with everyone on this stage, regardless of their political ideology.
Ms. Galt?
What nonpartisan means is it means representing everyone in the city of Troy. It means putting aside my personal opinions and the opinions of the other people on council, getting together and getting things done to represent the city of Troy on the kitchen table issues that matter to all of us, that don't have a partisan angle. It means things like transparency. which is not a partisan issue. Accountability, not a partisan issue. These things are things that we can work together on as a council to make sure that the City of Troy residents are properly represented and that we rebuild the trust that has been lost.
Mr. Shivaraman.
My position is this is very simple. Look at the facts, evaluate the options, build a win-win solution. This is our home. Troy is our home. This is where I'm raising my family. And I want to make the right decision for everybody. So nothing comes in front of that. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Nothing about any political views, nothing about where you're from or any of that. Look at the facts, look at what the people want, listen to the people. Go find out what people really want. That's what knocking on doors does for us. So, and that's what my promise is. Thank you.
Ms. Abraham.
There are no matters that come before council that are partisan. Snow plowing is not partisan. Road repair is not partisan. Passing balanced budgets, not partisan. The business of city council is to listen to our neighbors and do the best thing for them. There is no reason for city council to become partisan. It's one of the best things about how efficiently we run. It's because we are not getting into partisan fights. And frankly, the fact that I've been able to get above the fray partisan-wise is why I have both strong Republicans and strong Democrats supporting me in this race. So I feel very strongly that the council should continue to remain nonpartisan in behaviors and by ordinance.
Mr. Agawas.
So when I've been out door knocking, one of the most common questions asked to me is, okay, are you Republican or Democrat? And I say, hold on, it's a nonpartisan seat. They're like, no, really, are you Republican or Democrat? And so I have to explain that this is a nonpartisan race, and what nonpartisan means to me is we work for you, the entire city, regardless of political affiliation. It's more about being independently minded and trying to assess the facts and matters that come across and doing what's best for the city and not playing sides. I know that sometimes things can become politicized, but it's trying to maintain that level of independence and trying to stay pure and honorable with an issue and what's good on behalf of the community.
Mr. Epihidian.
What I believe nonpartisan really is representing all, listening to all, and making the best decisions that are in the interest of our community as a whole. As a planning commissioner for 5 years, I did that every single meeting. For the last 5 years, every 2 weeks we have a meeting. The projects that come before us to evaluate, to vote on, are completely nonpartisan. Every single project, everything that came before us, we have to evaluate in terms of what's the best interest of the community, how does it fit in the community, how does it impact the community. Absolutely nonpartisan issue. I will take that experience and I can apply it immediately to decisions and everything that comes up on council, and I understand that because I actually have done it for the past 5 years on the Planning Commission.
Those two questions were one of about 7 or 8 that dealt with transparency and nonpartisanship, but we're going to change topics. What is your position about the plans for the Troy Civic Center property? Ms. Galt.
I think the citizenry have made clear that they don't want to see commercial development in our civic center. So for all intents and purposes, that plan that was put forward a couple years ago is dead on arrival. It's not going to happen. However, this is an issue for the residents to decide. If the residents want to develop the property in some respect, in some form, I've heard proposals from people when I'm talking to them at their doors about maybe presenting more recreational opportunities at the Civic Center. Then that's what we should do. We should be doing what the people want done with the people's property. So before there is any development, any significant changes to the Civic Center property, we need to get the community involved and have their input on what needs to happen. And that's what the council should do. It should listen to the community.
Mr. Shivaraman.
So if you remember, I was one of the people who actually supported the amendment for the Troy Civic Center, Save the Civic Center. Unfortunately, that failed. But what I learned from that is that had gone too much. And the lesson I learned from that is it was too restrictive or too prohibitive. And that's where it needed to be open. A, the Troy Civic Center needs some updates that need to be done, but B, it does not mean we get rid of the green space around it. And we definitely don't want privatization of our public property, because that is built on our city taxes. That's built out of our money. That's it.
Ms. Abraham.
Thank you. One of the big flaws of the last attempt to look at the Civic Center development is that it didn't engage the community appropriately. It was assumed that the citizens would want something overly developed, if you will. And so that when engagement sessions did come about, and there weren't many of them, people were rightfully concerned. So if we want to talk about developing the Civic Center, and it could be anywhere from developing it as a premier park of the city to something developed, we need to understand the full gamut of options and what citizens really want to do. And then we can talk about what it might take to fund that, because as we know, none of that is free. And part of the reason that we were even having the conversation to begin with is that a lot of the buildings on the Civic Center campus need to be replaced or have a lot of upgrades to it. So we need to talk about it holistically, but let's look at all the options and not just one.
Mr. Agawas.
In my opening statement, I pledged that I wanted to see the Civic Center protected from commercial development. And I think that this is public land and should be used for public use, and there's a lot of untapped potential. I think Ms. Abraham was right, is that we went out of order a couple years ago. We assumed we knew what the community wanted, and we issued an architectural design that had a bunch of mixed-use development and condo and retail and some other civic services, and the people rejected it by and large. I think the way to go forward is, again, with community involvement. And I'm not saying this has to be the direction we go, but perhaps a good comparable could be Sterling Heights. We don't have to do everything that they do, but they just recently updated their Civic Center, and it's a great place for the community to come and get involved. It could give us some good ideas how to highlight the farmers market, have more involvement for our teens and our kids to go play, have places to interact and socialize. But the bottom line here is that this has to be used for the public, and there are ways to make sure that this is a net zero cost to taxpayers, and make sure that, again, open for public use.
Mr. Abahidian.
So a couple years ago, when we had a planning consultant that came to the city and actually put together an assessment and evaluation, they came up with the Civic Center property, 100 acres, being one of the most valuable properties that exists in the state of Michigan. But what happened a couple years ago was that we actually put the cart before the horse. The study was done, and the study was presented to the residents of Troy and said, what do you think about this? And I think what we need to do is actually the other way around. We need to have more community engagement. We need to have input from the residents of Troy to really listen and to hear what do the residents want out of that 100 acres. Just because it's valuable real estate doesn't mean we have to actually develop it boundary to boundary everywhere and make modifications to it that residents don't actually want. So what we need to do is have that community engagement and really there are parts of that property that today are underutilized, and that's just a reality. So we can go in there and make an assessment of every single area of that entire 100 acres and see what can be done to maximize its potential. Thank you.
Ms. Brooks.
Just recently, when I was canvassing, I had a long discussion with a resident about this very issue. He has lived in the city for decades and has expressed concern about the importance of protecting this property. The Civic Center area is incredibly important to the city of Troy. I agree with Ms. Erickson-Galt. This property belongs to the city, which means it belongs to the people of Troy. Many residents do view this property as parkland. With that being said, I do believe that any major development that is proposed in this area does deserve a vote by the residents of Troy. They deserve to have input as to what happens to this valuable piece of land.
Tension was high around the McClure proposed development. What is your position about the master plan in Troy? Mr. Shivaraman.
So McClure is something that is very close to my heart. I've actually stood with the residents 2.5 years ago when this whole project initiative came up. I've come to the City Council, I've come to the Planning Commission with the citizens who live in McClure and Alpine and in the Muir Neighborhood Gardens. And Sorry, I had a light distraction there, so let me start off there. This happens in the city too, by the way, especially when you talk McClure. I don't know what is so special about McClure, but going back to it, I've stood by the citizens of Mayo Gardens. I stood by them then, will stand by them again. So they are also signing a petition right now to take that particular section out of the master plan, and I'm in full support of that, number one. And I've also stood by other neighborhoods like this. When there was a self-storage that was put in front of Livernois, right now it's going to be a condo, but I stood with the citizens of Troy then to ensure that that doesn't happen, the self-storage right in front of these homes on Livernois by the ECHO. So will stand by rezoning, taking McClure and Mayo Gardens out of the master plan, and that's my stand on it. Thank you.
Ms. Abraham.
Thank you. The master plan was developed in very different economic times. And yes, it's been updated since then, but at its initial publication, it was not too long after the economic downturn when we were really looking for businesses to come to Troy. Our property values were tanking, businesses were folding, and you can see in the master plan with the Big Beaver District, the Rochester District, that certain provisions were put in place to put in more density, higher buildings. And as we're seeing development that's coming with that density, we're finding it's not meeting aligning with the character of the neighborhood. So I do support relooking at the master plans, particularly the Big Beaver District and the Rochester District, because these have become pain points. There was at once a time where there was going to be a very large apartment complex, a Monarch. It's not going to be there. There are homes there now. Let's look and see if that Big Beaver zoning district still makes sense in that area.
Mr. Gauss.
So the master plan is a really good document. The problem, though, is it's a hypothetical, almost abstract look at the city where it wants to go in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And sometimes there are mismatches between the hypothetical view and the actual reality of what's going on in the neighborhood. In the McClure-Sanchin Way district, new homes went up. And so the community has evolved to be more residential driven, and the master plan hasn't kept up to recognize that there's more homes going up and that this development going around potentially for an apartment complex just doesn't fit. I'd be in support of taking the McClure district out of the Big Beaver district, making sure that it's single family residential. But bigger picture, we have to find a better way to connect this hypothetical abstract view of where the city's going in 20, 30 years and connect it where we can in these different pain point areas.
Mr. Apahidian.
So McClure is not an isolated case. I have been on the Planning Commission for 5 years. I've seen these projects come in over and over again where we have these tension points between residential neighborhoods and commercial neighborhoods wanting to go up, the ones that border each other. And over and over what I see is that the master plan is more of the vision of what we want to do, especially on Big Beaver. And the vision has really changed from 10 years ago when we wanted development to come on Big Beaver to right now we're just flourishing. We have an abundance of development on Big Beaver, and I think it's time to revisit the master plan. And one thing that I propose if I get on city council is make a priority to actually revisit that master plan and make changes to where we eliminate some of the gray areas. There are gray areas in the zoning ordinance and in the master plan that send mixed messages to developers and to residents as well in terms of what's permitted or in terms of what the vision is or how far we can move the boundary of that master plan, especially along the Big Beaver corridor. And what I'm proposing is that we work that master plan and make some changes to make improvements to that and communicate that better.
Ms. Brooks.
I have personally spent many times, well, a few times actually, in the Alpine McClure district. I have talked to residents in the area, and myself and other people on the stage have also attended the Muir Gardens community meeting as well. And residents who live in this neighborhood are very clear about what they want and what they think brings value to their neighborhood. The master plan serves as a guideline to planning and development. However, there are many other factors that we need to consider, including safety issues and whether or not developments fit the character of the neighborhood. I do believe that we should revisit the master plan. And when revisiting it, we need to have input from our residents, and especially those who live in areas that are close to these proposed projects. It is my belief that we can have development that makes sense for our city.
Ms. Scald.
When I'm knocking doors, the #1 issue I hear and this isn't just in the McClure area, although it's been a very particular issue for them, is that people are very concerned about the level of overdevelopment in Troy. And those are the words they use. Troy is being developed at an alarming rate for most of our residents. So we need to be careful and make sure that when we're proposing and approving new developments, that they fit with the character of the existing communities that they're proposed for. So I agree with Ms. Abraham and Ms. Brooks that we should not only revisit the master plan, but we should keep in mind when we're approving these projects that there's safety issues, there's traffic issues. I live across from the Section 1 that's going to be developed very soon. And I don't believe for a minute that this is not going to be a traffic issue. So I completely agree with the people that are telling me that the rate of development is harmful to their neighborhoods.
Have you taken any campaign contribution from developers that have active or recently active projects in the city? Do you believe candidates should refuse these contributions? Ms. Abraham.
No, I have not taken any money from developers, and I will not. And the reason that I will not is because I am a sitting member of council. And every year I sign a code of ethics that requires me to not have even the appearance of any impropriety. And if I were to take money from a developer as a sitting council member, it could be perceived as a pre-commitment or a promise that I will do something for him or her. And I have to avoid that conflict of interest at all costs. So even though it makes fundraising a little bit harder, I feel very strongly about that.
Mr. Agawas.
The answer is yes. I have received contributions from 2 developers at a total of $550. The campaign finance reports will be out October 25th to verify that. But it's a tough question because these developers are also residents. They also live here in the city of Troy. If they're out-of-state developers just coming in and imposing the will, that'd be one thing. But there's a tough balance between respecting everybody here in the community, including developers, which in some ways can be very helpful, and in other ways they may be a little too aggressive or encroaching on neighborhoods. But no, to answer the question, I have received $550.
Mr. Apahidian.
Yes, I have received campaign contributions from developers, and that question actually came up just recently at the last Planning Commission meeting. There was a development that came up that had a developer that actually gave me a donation, and I disclosed that openly, and I actually asked the Planning Commission members to make a decision if I should recuse myself from that meeting, and they unanimously voted that and I can actually stay in that meeting, and because they know my record of integrity, they know I can make the decision based on facts and facts alone, and that will not change my vote on any project, and it never has, because 5 years of consistent voting with integrity on projects based on their merit on the facts of the project. And so I actually gave that over to the Planning Commission members to make that decision, and they decided that I can actually vote for that project. So any kind of contribution from any developer will not change in any way. There's no quid pro quo in any way in past projects or any future projects that come before council.
Ms. Brooks.
The short answer is no. I have not knowingly accepted any campaign money from developers. I do believe that if somebody does accept campaign money from developers, it is important that it is very openly disclosed and that they may be prepared to recuse themselves in certain decisions and certain votes. As Councilwoman Abraham said, I also agree that it is important that we avoid conflict of interest and also even the appearance of conflict of interest. It is really important that residents can trust that their elected leaders are working on their behalf.
Ms. Galt.
No, I've not received any contributions from developers, and I have no intention of taking contributions from developers. In fact, all of my contributions have come from ordinary citizens. My mother is my biggest donor. So I've been getting money the old-fashioned way by calling all my family and friends and asking them for money. So it is an issue. As been mentioned by Ms. Brooks and Ms. Abraham, conflict of interest is a real problem. How can you trust that a council member who's taking money from developers is voting in your best interests when they're deciding whether to approve a development? We need to focus on the real issue, which is what do the people of Troy want? And what do they want to see happen in their community? We should not be listening to special interests.
Mr. Shivaraman.
Now, I agree with Ann, my mom, on one thing. My largest contributor was my mother. So I agree with. I had made a promise not to take money from anybody who's got bad intentions for the city of Troy. Yesterday, I had a fundraiser. I did receive a $100 contribution from a developer, which I plan to return. It came through PayPal. It didn't come directly to me, so I have to reject it in PayPal. And that's in full honesty. So, thank you.
What will you do to support aging places for seniors in Troy? Mr. Agawas.
That's a good question. And just recently in a city council meeting, cluster development was approved along Willow Grove, I believe, for 29 residential units, about 1,500 square feet. And sometimes cluster plans can be good ways to incentivize developers to kind of work with the community and what they need. For example, one of the biggest things I hear going around door knocking is that a lot of the elderly population want to downsize in something smaller, a ranch perhaps. In this particular example with the cluster development, there's a bonus density given so that he could preserve some of the wildlife, some of the natural resources of the land, and as a consequence too, build a lot of the homes that are targeted for downsizing, such as the ranches that our community needs.
Mr. Apahidian.
So during my 5 years on the Planning Commission, one of the things that we actually proposed and passed was the cluster ordinance, and that was when I was chairman. That was a couple years ago. And the intent of the cluster ordinance was actually to do specifically that, to provide housing that was missing in Troy, and that was for the aging in place and for the actual baby boomers and for the millennials. And so we actually put that together to incentivize the developments that were small enough in size and square footage that it was what the age in place population really wanted. And when that passed, the demand was tremendous. The developers actually immediately put forth projects, and these projects actually sell out a lot of times before they even start their models. So I actually put that together with other planning commissioners to really meet that need of the age in place population in Troy.
Ms. Brooks.
I am a physical medicine and rehabilitation doctor. People are living longer with better quality of life, and my job is to help them accomplish that goal. Most of my patients are above the age of 55, and I understand the needs of seniors. One of the needs of seniors is to maintain a healthy lifestyle. Services such as Medigo help seniors get to their doctor's appointments. It also helps them to get to other places and maintain their ability to be active in the community. However, I was recently speaking at an independent living facility and heard that, there are still some issues with the public transportation system that maybe need to be addressed. I am also, seniors also live on fixed incomes, many of them, and I will be a responsible steward to their hard-earned tax dollars. Seniors are an incredibly important and valuable community, people in our community. And their issues really do need to be addressed.
Ms. Galt.
I was talking with a neighbor recently while I was out knocking doors, and she expressed to me her very grave concern that she had physical issues due to her age. Her husband had Alzheimer's, and she was at her wit's end of how she was going to get things done. So in some cases, what our seniors just need to know is that help is available and where that help is available. And the city could do a better job of letting seniors know what's available. I agree with Ms. Brooks that transportation is a huge issue. There are some resources, SMART and Medigo, but they have their limitations. And one of the things I pledged to do after I become a member of City Council is to hold a transportation town hall and to make sure that the senior issues are regarding transportation are addressed. And then finally, I would just say a lot of senior issues are the same issues everyone else has. And so if we're taking care of everyone, we're taking care of seniors.
Mr. Shivarama.
this is one thing that I'm living with because I've got with me my 84-year-old mom, who of course is a senior citizen, right, of Troy. And just to get her from one place to the other, transportation is a big peril right now because me and my wife, we are working. So getting her from one point to other, just for doctor's appointments and things like that. We use SMART and other facilities, but that has to be improved on. The other important thing is for senior citizens is to have affordable housing in the city of Troy. So if you looked at my first top 3 goals, the third one was to make sure that we use our hard-earned money in taxes in the right way and we make housing affordable. And yes, the city is moving in the right direction, but there can be much more that can be done in terms of providing affordable housing to senior citizens. So that's me.
Ms. Abraham.
Thank you. It's not what I will do for seniors, it's what I'm doing now and will continue to do. Just in this last budget cycle, we allocated more funds for the Troy Ride program, formerly known as Medigo, because we were hearing that Medigo had to turn down people with appointments because there just weren't enough buses. There wasn't enough transportation. We made the decision to reallocate funds from the Troy Trolley, which wasn't doing so well, and allocate it to Medigo where we knew that there was a need, and I'm committed to expanding that based on those needs. I do think we can partner better with local groups like the Friends of the Troy Seniors so that things like the Home Chores program, which will help seniors or those with disabilities take care of things around the house. I think we have some opportunities of partnering at the grassroots level with seniors. And certainly, cluster development, I'm always a proponent of those smaller ranch houses, so I will always look at those projects very carefully.
Thank you. Our question and answer period for the candidates for Troy City Council has come to a close. I'd like to thank all of the candidates for their participation in the forum tonight. And I would also like to ask that our audience just stay in their seats. We're going to do a very quick change and we will then begin the candidates forum for the mayoral candidates. Thank you very much. Hello, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the second half of our candidates forum. We will now be hearing questions from our 2 mayoral candidates. This evening we have with us Ethan Baker and Dave Henderson. We will begin with a 2-minute opening statement by Mr. Baker.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Karen. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us today. Thank you to all of you who are watching out in the audience, who are watching later on your computer, on the TV, on your phone. Thank you to Dave for doing this tonight. I think it should be a very interesting conversation. I have to say, I lost my first bet. I thought for sure Dave would wear a tie tonight. He didn't do it, so we're off and rolling. 1 tie, 1 without a tie. I am Ethan Baker. I'm currently the Mayor Pro Tem on Troy City Council. I've been on Troy City Council since 2015 when I got elected in November. It has been my honor and privilege to be a Troy City Council member for the past 4 years, even through the highs and lows of what we've experienced here in our city. I am an attorney. I have my own law practice here in Troy. I'm married to Bethany. I have 3 wonderful children. We are a very happy family here in Troy. We chose to move to Troy just over 10 and a half years ago, and we've been here ever since, loving everything about our great city. 9 years ago, just over 9 years ago, I got asked to participate in our Homeowners Association board and in the neighborhood. And for the past actually that was 10 years ago, for the past 9 years I've been the board president. So for some reason, year after year, they keep re-electing me as board president. I think it's because I've got a good track record of working with my neighbors, helping them out when they need it, putting together good social community events, and really working hard for public service. Our city is at an interesting place. We've had a lot go on. I think you'll probably hear in about a minute and a half or so that my opponent is a neighbor, not a career politician. I think that could be because People think that I'm a career politician because I have run for public office before. I don't shy away from that. I think it's been the greatest thing that I've done because it's given me the opportunity to talk to thousands and thousands of Troy voters. I know what they're interested in, what they're looking for. They're worried about our development, our green space. They're worried about transparency and trust and ethics in our city. And they're looking for a council and a mayor who's going to listen to them, who's going to represent their interests and pay close attention and have good decorum. So I ask for your vote on November 5th. If you're looking for more information, I'm at bakerfortroy.com.
Mr. Henderson.
Good evening. Thank you, League of Women Voters, for doing this event again. And thank you to the residents that come out and support this event each time it takes place. I've had the privilege of living in Troy and or working in Troy practically my entire life. I was born here in 1961. I graduated from Athens High School in 1979. My wife Kelly and I have been married for 37 years. We have 2 wonderful adult children and 7 of the best grandchildren on the planet. 4 of those grandchildren live here in Troy and attend Troy schools. My father was invested in Troy as well. He was the special education director for the city of Troy, retired from Troy schools in the late 70s. And my sister still lives in the house, you'll appreciate this, that I was raised in on Kirkton. So we have long-standing roots in the city of Troy. I've had the honor of serving you for the past 8 years as your councilman, including 1 year as mayor pro tem when it was my time in the rotation. And I believe I've honorably fulfilled the needs of the community I serve. I've helped make tough decisions that favor the city. I've attended an estimated 200 ribbon cuttings, grand openings, grand reopenings, and special events in the last 8 years. I've been the standard bearer for marijuana, not having marijuana operations in the city of Troy, trying to cut down on the amount of grow operations that we have. And since we lost the election in Troy with regard to marijuana lost by 1,000 votes, I was the standard bearer for getting rid of the retail, or not having retail operations in the city of Troy. The mayoral position in Troy is one of 7 equal voices that represent our residents and business community fairly. I've served during times of great harmony on council, and I've served in times of 3 turbulent periods. We've always survived and come through for the better with each of these experiences. And I look forward to continuing those efforts on City Council as your mayor.
We will now begin the question and answer period. Please describe what you think is an appropriate relationship between individual council members with the city manager and the city staff. Mr. Baker.
It's a great question. It's certainly come up a lot over the past few years, especially as it relates to Brian Kishnick and his role as our city manager. I'm not sure that question can be quantified in numbers. I don't think it's about the amount of time you spend or how you have a relationship. I think it's about how you respect the community and understand that there are ethical boundaries that we need to all have. I think there's nothing wrong with being friendly, but as I've told many city employees, I can be friendly, I can't be your friend. I don't think that's appropriate, and that's something we need to be very careful of, because as we've seen, that relationship can lead to increased problems in our city. And we all have differences of opinion on this, and we're all human, but at the end of the day, we have an ethical job to maintain our boundaries as council members. We oversee a city manager and a city attorney. Like I said, we can be friendly with them, but we shouldn't be friends. It's gotten us into trouble in the past, and it would again if we did.
Mr. Henderson.
Same question. I'm a relationship builder. That's my nature. That's how I've always been. That's how I'll always be. We have a charter that states the city manager acts at the request of at least a majority on council. But that doesn't mean that you can't have a relationship with that individual and let that individual know personally where you're at with various things. Again, having an open relationship and having the communication between the two of you that builds trust and builds the ability to get good, quick responses is very appropriate, and that's how I would continue to serve the city.
What would you do to prevent Troy from losing the residential business balance? Too many executives like to bring in as much money as possible, destroying the nice community. Mr. Henderson.
So our tax base used to be, and still is kind of close to that, 60% on the business side and 40% residential. So it's a critical piece in our community to embrace the business community and to allow that dynamic to afford us all the great things that we have in the city of Troy. So we have to welcome, we have to embrace businesses, and our daytime population increases a great deal because of our business community. So it's important to nurture that and to have businesses thrive in our community.
Mr. Baker.
Businesses are a key part of Troy's economy. They're a key part of our neighborhoods. They're a key part of our tax base, which provide us with the great resources we have in the city of Troy. We can't do anything to hurt that or to harm that. I think that you have to have a proper balance. Obviously, the residents, we can't forget, make up the other part of the city, and we represent the residents as well. So there always is a balancing act. Troy has done very well coming back from the recession of 10 years ago. It's worked very hard. That's been done with good leadership at certain points. It's also because our businesses have grown and thrived in the city of Troy. At all the ribbon cuttings we go to, we quite often hear, Troy's been really friendly to our business. They really helped us get into this city and get going, and they really appreciate that. So we do have a reputation as being good for business, but we always have to remember that our residents matter just as much, and there is always a balancing act.
What are your thoughts regarding development of city center property? Remain a green space, Troy's version of, quote, Central Park, or become a crass commercial development going to the highest bidders? Mr. Baker.
I think I know what the answer to the questionnaire has. Here's the reality. We learned 2 years ago that it's a very, very controversial and important issue in our city. And based on that, I don't believe we can move forward with any kind of development of the Civic Center without having a vote of the people, without fully engaging the people with proper community engagement, letting them know that we're listening to you, we understand where you're coming from, and we want to hear what you think is best. Personally, at this point, I've come to the conclusion that the majority of Troy citizens believe the Troy Civic Center should remain mostly park-like and that we should keep the green space in place. We definitely need to enhance it, though. I believe it's underutilized, and there are things we could do based on all the previous council's reports and plans that they put together to make it a better place where we really need a community gathering place in Troy, and the Civic Center seems like the prime spot to do that. We also have aging facilities on the Civic Center campus that could use a boost of funds. How we pay for all of that is always the question. If we can work something out with the Civic Center and make it a better park for all of our citizens and maybe put some money into the buildings in that area, we'll all be better off.
Mr. Henderson.
Yeah, we did learn a great deal a couple years ago on the Civic Center property, and one of the things that I was pushing for, and I hope to keep pushing for, is a vote of the people. What do we do with it? Do we leave it alone? Do we make a Central Park out of it? Do we do some sort of a hybrid where we have some development that goes on that dovetails with a park-like feature? All of those things are great ideas, but as Councilman Baker indicated, who funds that? If you have a great partnership with development or developers, a lot of times you can get a lot of those things paid for by the developer and have some really nice features. But if we're going to take it on ourselves and make just a park out of it, we need to find the funds to be able to do that. It's a question that needs to be pursued, and I think we can only do that with a ballot initiative or a survey or series of surveys to find out.
Please explain what you believe transparent government is. Mr. Henderson.
So when I first got on council, we all supported putting the checkbook online. Trying to make all things city government related visible to the people. I have not been an advocate of closed sessions. I don't know if you've been paying attention the last couple of years, but I don't like going into closed sessions for anything other than litigation or contract negotiations and some personnel issues. I always fight against trying to go into meetings where the public is not fully aware of what we're discussing. I would rather discuss some of the critical issues right in front of the people on camera so everybody can see what's going on. So I'm an advocate and always have been of transparency. I'm an open book. Facebook, you can find me on Facebook, and if you've got a question, bring it up. Always willing to talk about it and discuss anything out in the open with people.
Mr. Baker.
Transparency is key to our success as a city government. I think that we have some key differences on this issue, Councilman Henderson and I, and we've experienced those, and you may have seen them over the past year or so, or two at this point. It's one thing to talk about transparency. It's another thing to actually vote for transparency. I did make a vote a year and a half ago to release a report that had previously been kept private, and I did that in the name of transparency in an effort to help rebuild trust in our community. Just not going into closed sessions is not what transparency is about. Obviously, closed sessions play a role in our government. Sometimes they're worthy, sometimes maybe they're overused. But the reality is, the more we can be transparent with our community, the better off we will be in earning their trust, which will make us better able to govern them and have them come along with us when we have important decisions to make. You can't be partially transparent. You're either transparent or you're not. And it seems like we hem and haw as to what that is going to look like in our city. You have to go all in or all not, and I really stand for that.
Have you taken any campaign contribution from developers that have active or recently active projects with the city? Do you believe candidates should refuse these contributions? Mr. Baker.
It's a very timely question. There's a lot of development issues going on in our city. For this race, I'm not taking any money from any developers. In fact, I did receive an online contribution from Kamal, who's a very well-known developer and person in our community, a couple weeks ago. Shortly thereafter, a very controversial project came up, the Crooks Road townhomes just north of Waddles on Crooks. And I called Kamal. I said, Kamal, I appreciate it, but I don't think I should be taking this money from you. And I returned it to him. And trust me, returning money in a campaign is very difficult to do. But I did that, and here's why. I believe that no matter what, there's always influence. And you may try to fight against it, but it's really hard to take a donation in your left hand and not vote for that guy with your right hand. And in this day and age, with what's going on with our development, the trust and transparency issues, and all that we've gone through, I think the best course for me is to eliminate that risk completely. And I think that all candidates at this point should, knowing what a controversial issue some of these development projects are in our city.
Mr. Henderson.
So to answer the question about whether or not the money is an influence, I've had money from developers or people that do business in the city building anything in the past. One of them in particular wanted to, being a realtor, this is a big problem for me, but he wanted to pave his road, and I had his house listed on that road. I literally recused myself from the vote and then lost $1 million listing. So this has hurt me financially with some of the decisions I've had to make. Have I accepted developer funds? Yeah, I have, but I don't look at I don't look at that as a bad thing. Every person on council has accepted funds from a developer in the past. So those things happen. It's not illegal. It's not immoral. It's not unethical. It's a matter of life, and people do this. If I have a track record of being able to make decisions that are not influenced by anybody's financial input in my campaigns.
Okay, this question has 3 questions within it, so we'll take one at a time. It says, please explain your vote on 3 important council votes. The first one was the release of the Plant Moran investigation to the public. Mr. Henderson.
I'm going to have to...
You mean the Lang report?
I don't know.
Can we talk about the Lang report instead? I don't know that.
It just says,
I'd rather talk
please,
about the Lang report.
I'm assuming that's what they're referring to, but that would be my assumption, not
did we even
the specific.
had to vote on releasing the Plant Moran report? That was in a close. We can't talk about it. It's a close session.
All right, I'll go to the next one.
Unless you want to talk about the Lang report, we can talk about that.
All right, why don't you do that?
Okay, so the Craig Lang report was a report that was put together on the the former city manager that now rests in prison. We, as a body, we voted to protect that because it was an attorney-client privilege report. I even recall my competitor here chastising Craig Lang when he came in to tell us that we should release the report. And I remember Ethan telling him that he was inappropriate coming in and putting that kind of influence on us. And then he proceeded to protect that report. The day that report was released, Ethan Baker turned on it. It was April 19th of 2018. And not many people realize what that day was, but I do. April 19th of 2018 is the exact same day that Doug Tietz filed to run against Ethan Baker for state rep. And that evening, Ethan Baker voted to release that report. So although there's an indication that he is not a career politician, some of the decisions he's made in the last couple years have been strictly geared towards what's going to get him the next vote in the next election. So that April 19th, you can look it up. I'll supply you the links if you want to look.
Mr. Baker.
You know, April 19th, I had no idea. You and Doug did a lot of work to figure that out, Dave. That's fun. I had no idea.
No, I did that.
That's amazing. Okay, so good job. Doug had called me 6 months before that and told me he was probably going to run, so it had nothing to do with that. I struggled with that decision. In summer of 2016, Councilwoman Abraham brought a resolution to release that report. Brian Kishnick was still employed by our city, and I thought it would be a bad precedent to release a report where employees who were having to work with Brian Kishnick still would be at risk for having their confidential statements released to the public. I didn't think that was my job. I thought that was up to them. I'm an attorney. I understand the privilege very well. A year and a half later, Brian Kishnick gets fired, and I struggled for that whole time listening to the community, listening to people who mean a great deal to me, come to the decision that the right thing to do was release that report. In fact, at that meeting, if it was April 19th, I tried to do a compromise first that actually had some support, but it didn't have full support. And I said, we either, like I said about transparency, you're all in or you're opaque. So I said, you know what? The right thing to do for the city and to try to heal is to release that report in its entirety. And as the client, as we were in the city, as the client, I agreed to release that privilege, and that's perfectly allowable, and it was the right decision.
Okay. The next part of the question is the proposed payment to the former finance director. Mr. Baker?
Being very cautious that we're always potentially in a litigation situation, I did vote not to approve a payment to Tom Darling, the former finance director. I thought it was, let me think about how I can say that without saying anything that I might know. It wasn't the right thing to do. I thought that based on what I'd read in the Plant Moran report, what I'd known about Tom Darling, it didn't make sense to me to pay him around $100,000 as severance. It didn't make sense then. It doesn't make sense now. So I fully stand by that decision. And I understand that some felt a different way. That makes sense. But in my heart of hearts, knowing what the city had gone through and where we had been and gone with Tom Darling, paying him $100,000 or just over, it just did not make sense to me.
Mr. Henderson?
So the payment was for a severance. We released him. It was a severance package that was going to be put together for him. The severance package, since it was denied and we're now litigating, could cost us even more than that. So often we take the advice of our city attorney to either pay these settlements out or litigate them. And if we litigate them, a lot of times it costs well over what it would have cost for a severance. So I know I've heard the rumblings from people that we just wanted to pay him off and sweep it under the rug. That's not the case. We wanted to pay him off so that we could move on, give him what was due him, and not have to end up in a long, lengthy legal battle that may cost us even more than his severance.
Okay, the third part of it says the new resolution to begin an investigation of council itself, citing the culture of complicity mentioned in the Plant Moran work. Mr. Henderson?
I'm not sure that was a question necessarily. I'm explaining.
You're
okay.
explaining your vote.
So this perchance ended up on our agenda for Monday's meeting again. So this keeps resurfacing. And one of the things with this culture of complicity, we had Plant Moran do an investigation, if you will, and it was really the initial stages of this investigation were to find out if there was any other financial issues that may have occurred under Brian Kishnick's regime, if you want to call it that. And they really didn't find any. They found some nickel and dime stuff, nothing major, nothing that rose to the top. But what they did is they interviewed employees, and they got nuggets of information from employees that they don't even share that information with us as a body, and then they write an opinion piece about what they felt was going on at the city at that time. And I have a real problem with opinion pieces if you can't show me your work. Show me the data, show me the details, so that we can make an assessment and a judgment as to what happened. Now, this investigation that's coming our way, or that Councilman Baker would like to have on his brochures and hit me with, is simply trying to verify whether or not the City Council was complicit based on these reports that we can't even look at.
Mr. Baker.
Thank you. So much to go with there, only a minute, so let me try to be efficient here. First of all, to talk about Brian Kishnick's issues, his nickel and dime stuff is appalling to me. It was far worse than that, and we all know that in this city.
The internal stuff.
Yeah, well, the report speaks for itself, as it does speak about the culture of complicity and what this council, potentially what role this council played in that. What it doesn't say is specifically what this council did, and that's what I think needs to be investigated and looked into. I am bringing forward another resolution that I'm trying to get passed on Monday night, which is limited in scope to what I previously brought, but I think it's extremely important for transparency, for a teaching moment, to say, hey, this is where council went wrong, this is what council should have done, and let's try to move forward in a healthy and positive way. Anything short of that is sweeping it under the rug. Listen, when the check engine light in your car goes on, you don't just keep driving and try to ignore it. The reality is you run the diagnostics and you find out what's wrong with the car so you can move on and drive safely. That's what the city needs. We need to do the diagnostics, finish the last piece of the puzzle, and then we can all move forward in a healthy way. It has nothing to do with my campaign or my brochure. I've been talking about this for months, and I'll continue to talk about it for months after.
So as I mentioned in the first portion, we had at least 7 or 8 questions about trust, transparency, and this will be the final one for this portion. What reforms are needed to restore trust and confidence in city government? Mr. Baker.
First things first, we have to, the more transparency, the better, right? I think we start with this investigation to council to find out where we went wrong so we can move forward and have it be an educational teaching moment for this council, for the next council, and for a council 10, 15 years ago, because history can repeat itself. We all know that. We run the risk. If we don't figure out what happened, we can't move forward in a healthy and positive way. The other thing we've come to realize fairly recently is that we have a Troy City Council code of ethics that if you violate something on there, there's no ramifications for doing it. So there has to be a new ethics policy put into place that has teeth put into it. It's simply not right that we are entrusted with your tax dollars, entrusted with your public respect. Well, respect may be an overstatement. And we have no consequences if there's an ethical violation. The next part of that is better education. Our council members, for the past 4 years, we've had very little training on what it is to be an ethical council person. As some have said, you just know ethics. But you know what? Obviously not. We've seen that the ethical lines have been blurred in our city, among our council, among our former city managers. So those 3 things are really important.
Mr. Henderson.
So the trust factor, restoring trust, the Plant Moran report did a lot of great things for us. We have a very nice document that was put together outlining a lot of things that we needed to do to fix various processes within the city. And as we went through our study sessions and we talked about those things, Mr. Miller has already addressed most of them on the fly as we go. They would be presented with these issues, and they would fix processes based on what was presented to them from Plant Moran. So we've done a lot of those things. We fixed the whistleblower process 3 years ago when Brian Kishnick's problems first arose. We put him on a program, and we fixed a lot of the processes internally that needed to be repaired. We put him on a plan that was approved by all of council. So we have already done these things. What's unfortunate is we keep looking back. I propose that the new mayor should look forward rather than look back behind us. And yes, looking back behind us, we can determine what we've done wrong. And I think there's no question that there are some mistakes made, and one of the biggest ones is in prison right now. And we need to just move on from that and do better as a city.
Troy's library millage is expiring in June of 2021. What would be your position on how to move forward at that point? Mr. Henderson.
The millage has proven to be able to fund the library, and we have a great library, and the people will probably approve that millage again if presented to them. There's been talk about increasing that millage to maybe open the library 7 days and fund it a little bit differently. There's been another mention of maybe even taking it out completely and funding it completely out of a different millage. So there are a lot of things that could happen. I'm in favor of status quo. Let it happen the way it's happening now. Let the people decide that millage is going to happen again. And 7-day library, if it fits in the budget, it fits in the budget. If it doesn't, it doesn't. We are not the only library in the area that's closed 1 day a week. We just happen to be closed Friday instead of Sunday, where most libraries are closed Sunday and not Friday. So I think things are going pretty well.
Mr. Baker.
I think that, June of 2021, our economy could look substantially different. We already know that the millage we have for the library isn't fully funding the library at the level it should be. We're supplementing out of the general fund for certain repairs, for certain things. And all the statistics show that the more minimum wages go up, that everything is costing more at the library and the millage isn't going up. So we do have an issue that we're going to have to face when that millage comes up for renewal. Whether it gets renewed at the same level, whether it gets increased, whether we take it out and put it into a separate library board, those are issues that the next mayor is going to have to work with council, and they're going to have to figure out how to do it. I'm all for listening to what the people are looking for, what they want to do. I think we've shown in 2015, the millage was renewed with just over 70%. I think that was quite a testament to the hard work that the Kathy Russ, the library, does to provide a good service to everybody. My kids love the library. We're going frequently, and it's always packed when I'm in there. So it is a community asset, and I'm thankful to see that we are doing so well with it. Opening it 7 days would be great. I've tried to do that in the past. We really have to figure out what the people will want and what we can support financially.
What is your position about the plans for the Troy Civic Center property? Mr. Baker.
Okay, we talked a little bit about this before. Again, a vote of the people is what's necessary if there's going to be any dramatic change at this point. How we get to that vote and what question gets posed, that's been the million-dollar question for us for a few years. Again, I think that the majority of people in our city are looking to keep that as a park-like setting with enhancements, whether that's fountains or artwork or an amphitheater of sorts. That's something to be determined. We've got great reports that were done by previous councils and citizens in our community. We have to take those again and revisit what we really want to do in this day and age, knowing that things have changed since 2004 and 2008, and there's always going to be room for improvement. Whether that includes potentially, parceling off some of the property in front of City Hall that's kind of wasted and has great value, and use those funds to help make the park a better place for our community, that's always a possibility. But then again, maybe that's not what the people of our community want. It really comes down to community engagement, meeting with the people, not doing dog and pony shows and trying to force something down them, but getting good input so we can move forward in a positive way.
Mr. Henderson.
Yeah, we were supposed to do a survey here this past year, but things got a little bit funny in the city. So some of that has gotten sidetracked for us. So my goal as mayor would be to try to figure out what the people really want there. And yeah, it could be a real nice park if we could find funding for that. It could be a real nice development. It is 106 acres of the most valuable property probably in all of Michigan right now. 106 acres, as we talked through that whole exercise a year and a half ago or 2 years ago now, can fit in the entire downtown Royal Oak on that piece of property. So it is a really valuable asset to the city. What we do with it, yes, the people need to decide. We need to figure out a way to try to get that data, whether it be a ballot proposal or a survey. We need to get on that and get that fixed.
In your opinion, what is the greatest challenge for the city of Troy? Mr. Henderson.
Greatest challenge right now, I think, is develop. We haven't really talked about development too much, but development development is good. You have to have good, solid development in a community, or the community withers away and dies. So, good development is good. What we have right now is a disconnect between residents, developers, planning commission, and our master plan. So what happens is a developer buys these pieces of property that have been sitting around for decades in families, and now these things are worth $500,000, $750,000, and they're retiring and selling these projects to developers. We have to figure out a way where developers can have a predictable service from the city to allow them to know what is allowable, what the city will approve, and what the neighbors in transition areas especially will accept as neighboring partners.
Mr. Baker.
There's no question development is a necessity for any city to continue to grow and to thrive. But see, the disconnect, I think, is that the residents aren't being heard. All I hear every day when I'm knocking on doors, when I'm talking to people in the community, is that they're sick and tired of us overdeveloping Troy. The green space is going away. Developers are coming in and trying to squeeze as many units onto a small piece of property as they can find, and people have had it. It's not why they moved to Troy. It's not why they've stayed in Troy, and now they're sick by what's happening. And I don't blame them. We have an outdated master plan at this point that was put into place at a time when our economy was in a much different state. We need to update the master plan and realize that neighborhoods don't want apartment buildings in them. I voted against proposals like that. They don't want easy storages across the street from their developments. I voted against that. People are rightly concerned about the influence that developers have had with our current mayor, with some on council, and what we're going to do to fix that. And that is the one issue that I hear more than anything else in this entire city is please do something about the development. It's increasing our traffic. It's making things terrible for our city. Please help us.
The League of Women Voters Troy area would like to thank the candidates and the audience for their participation. Voters will be asked to vote for our mayoral candidates and our city council candidates, as well as a ballot proposal to renew funding for Oakland Community College. You may find information on the candidates in the League of Women's voter guide, as well as on our website, vote411.org. This is a nonpartisan site that will give information about candidates and the proposals. This forum will be rebroadcast on CMN TV, video on demand, and video streaming via the League of Women Voter Troy area website. You may find more information by checking local listing for dates and times. Again, we thank you for participating, and please remember to vote on November 5th. Thank you.